basically streams. Oh, you know what? I forgot to set up my Twitch because it's supposed to also stream to Twitch, but it's not doing that.
Are you on
everybody.
Are you on D Live?
No.
That's like the new thing. It's actually like really well done for being like a new competitor.
Really?
To a product. Yeah, I'm actually like pretty surprised.
Okay. What's it like?
It's like, I think it has like a similar feel as like Twitch, but it's like, I don't know. It's just very, like, usually those products when they come out like that are competitors to like mainstream companies, I feel like they're like half baked.
Hey, they're saying hey Daniel.
Hey everyone, what's up?
Jonathan.
Hey Janet, how are you?
So Jonathan says,
I'm so happy Janet's here in the chat.
Oh hi.
Janet,
oh great.
Janet from Culture.
Oh awesome.
Yeah.
Hey Janet from Culture. This guest over here, everyone, this is Daniel Bostic. He is the leader of Culture. He's the co-leader of Culture, a co-founder of Culture, CULTTTURE. That's where my new podcast is, the one that I keep talking to you guys about. And they do a lot of culture-related stuff, entertainment. Here's Daniel. Daniel, introduce... Oh, and you might have actually recognized him from a live stream we did from CPAC.
Yeah, that was honestly, I think, the most fun I've ever had on a live stream.
Yeah.
It was just so much fun, and I think that, like, it was funny. I had a lot of, like, friends and stuff that were, like, messaging me because they had watched it and they had seen it, and they were like, you know, I always, like, wonder, I think people, like, get this idea about, like, what CPAC's like, and they think you're just, like, in conferences, like, plotting world takeovers all day long, but it's, like, you don't really go to CPAC for that. You just, like, go to, like, hang out with cool people.
Yeah.
And, you know, and see some
It's more of a social thing, yeah, totally. Pat McDonald, hey! So Daniel's actually here in DC. He came here to help me move, which was, like... I don't know if any of you have a best friend like that. This is, like, I'm pretty lucky. And not only did he help me move and help me set up, like, he did a pretty good job, and I'll show you in this, I'll show you in a video that we have coming up later, just a little bit of what it looks like, the setup, and so Daniel really helped design a lot of it, set things up.
You always have, like, so many comments in the chat, which is one thing I love about your broadcast. Like, people are, like, locked in with you. Like, they're always talking about what you're talking about. It's, like, awesome. It's really cool.
I'm really lucky. Yeah. I've got the coolest people.
When is Daniel not traveling? Yeah, that's actually accurate. I think I clocked, like, 48,000 miles last year was what I added up.
Whoa.
And, it was a lot. I was too much last year. I'm scaling back a little bit. But,
that's
like,
insane.
the DC, I was telling Pardes, like, the DC flight is actually, like, from Charleston is, like, I can leave at, like, 6 in the morning, and I can be in downtown DC getting breakfast by 9 a.m. Like, it's kind of amazing if you think about it. Yeah. I love it. It's one of, like, my favorite trips to make, so I was a little bit selfish.
Do you think in the future they're going to have, like, a new way of traveling that will kind of, like, zap you in a new place, and it's, like really
teleportation?
Cheap? Yeah.
So, like, the other guy that was helping us move the other day, he was asking me about that, and we were talking about teleportation, and I was like, but what is, like, the next thing after teleportation? Like, will there ever be a day when people are just like, oh, remember when people used to teleport places? Remember what a pain that was?
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe in our lifetimes.
Those, like, very, like, unfortunate.
I need to make sure that I share. I'm not, like, being rude. I want to, like, make sure that I share this on Periscope.
We had a really very nice gathering last night.
That was a lot of fun. That was so much fun. That's why, like, now it's like, now we're, like, hearing ourselves on this. We don't do that.
Can we say what we
No.
did? Okay. Anyway.
We had a great time. It was just a lot of bonding with, you know, we had some friends over, and it was like a housewarming party. I never host parties ever, because my old place was really tiny, and I never had room for anyone, even for myself. I was never home because I didn't want to work and everything at home all day. Yeah, and I feel like I love your new space because it's, like, laid out so perfectly to, like, entertain people, but it's not, like,
it's not like so big that like people sometimes like with parties it's been interesting. You see people and they give parties and like even if their place is just a little bit too big, then people get like siloed off.
Yeah.
And you wind up with like cliques of people around the room. And this space is just like perfect for it. And last night everyone was just having a great time. Everyone was like talking to everyone. Like there was no like side conversations. It was just amazing.
Yeah. And everyone was hearing about everyone's deep innermost problems.
Yeah. I forgot about that. That did also happen.
But so it was actually really cool, and it was really nice. Like it was very I liked it. It was like probably like a lot of fun.
It was awesome.
Okay, so as promised, we are going to talk a little bit about religion tonight, because religion is the one thing that makes this country stand out from other countries. We are one of the most religious Western developed countries, and it influences so much of our politics. And we just don't talk about how much it influences. We just talk, we have the left is just constantly bashing those on the right with religion. But
and like to be fair, like the right does that too.
Right.
Like it's funny, like we talked a little bit the other night. I think like we have a lot in common with religion, even though we came from very different religious like groups. We have like a lot in common and a lot of shared experience, which I think is really really interesting. And like your family, I don't know how much you want to talk about this, but like they're like hardcore Jewish.
Yeah.
And like you had said that before, and it's sometimes I think it's hard to like know what it means, because there's like a lot of people who talk about Judaism, but like your family is like absolutely entrenched in Judaism.
Yeah.
And my family in South Carolina, and me, are very deeply Christian. And it's just interesting, I think, like, given, my family's very conservative. I think your family, it's safe to say, is very conservative. Yeah. And it was just kind of cool, like, riffing on that and, like, talking about those ideas back and forth.
Yeah, like, Daniel would say some of his experiences, and I would be like, that really sounds like my family. That sounds like my school, like, the things that we were taught. It's kind of like, it sounds like a human tool that is not necessarily specific to a religion, but just like a tool that religions use.
Yeah, and I think that, like, some of that is based on the fact that, like, Judaism and Christianity do share, like, part of the same, like, texts.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of fun talking with you about that. And, like, probably a lot of people don't actually know this. I actually have a degree in theology. And
I didn't know this until just a few days ago.
Yeah, and everyone's like, why do you have a degree in theology? But I think it taught me to understand the human experience at, like, a very core level. And, because that's what religion is it's very philosophical. It's really just like people trying to make sense of the world around them, and people drawing on data from things that have happened in history, and then sort of formulating a belief pattern. And what's interesting, and what I really liked talking with you about the other day, was that it's amazing how, like, almost every religion is used as a political weapon by both sides, right? So, like, Christianity, it's so funny, like, you see, like, people in Christianity people will say, well, Jesus was, a leftist, and Jesus, believed that we should welcome all immigrants into the country, and Jesus, believes X, Y, and Z, and then but the right does the exact same thing. And they're like, no, Jesus was, a conservative.
Jesus was whatever I want him to be.
Right. And it's like Jesus, like, transcends all of that. And that's, like, I think what frustrates me, like, people on the right and the left do it. And I don't know if people do this in Judaism, but, like, people on the left and right in Christianity do this. And I'm like, no, Jesus, like, transcends man's attempt to govern themselves. Like, Jesus is, like, completely outside of that equation.
Well, we don't have to think about it and we didn't have to think about it. We just did whatever our rabbi told us to do.
That's really interesting.
Whoever the rabbi told us to vote for.
That's actually really funny though, because evangelicals do the same thing.
Yeah.
By and large, like evangelical Christianity does the same thing, where like it's pretty much understood like who you're supposed to vote for.
Yeah.
And it's funny to listen. I've like heard these sermons in like mega churches where these pastors are sort of talking about they're like, they don't want to lose like their tax exempt status. So they'll just be like, you know, make these jokes like, and we all know, you know, who we're supposed to be voting for. And you know, it's like, there are certainly issues that you can like draw inferences from, in my case, Jesus' life, to like I could see how someone can look at things that Jesus did and find like something that supports their political belief. And I don't necessarily even think that that's always bad, but it just frustrates me that like, I feel like Christianity and Jesus in particular have been turned into this weapon for politics.
Yeah.
And it seems like maybe that's happened a little bit in Judaism too.
Yeah, 100%. And especially, you know, I know the Jewish community is like this. It's very, very connected. It's like one large family, and everyone is kind of very in tune with what the rest of the community is doing, and everyone just kind of has to go along with the same thing. And if you don't, then it's a very it's a very tribal, is that the word to say?
Mm-hmm.
It's like a very tribal religion, because if you go too far out, then you'll get flack for it.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to just you have to, like, you have to do the same thing as everybody else. It's very hard to be your own person and be like an individual thinker, even though it shouldn't be, but it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it comes to politics, it's like that too. If you don't have a certain type of politics, you're not Jewish. You're not Jewish enough. You're anti-Semitic, even though you're Jewish, but you're anti-Semitic. So there, yeah, that's a problem in Judaism, I think. There's not a lot of room for it being an individual.
So I don't know if you want to talk about this, but that totally reminds me of the conversation that we had last night, shortly after the party, where you were talking about your name.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know if you want to, like, tell people, like, sort of what's behind your name, because I thought it was really incredible. Like, I listened to it and I was just like, wow, this is, like, really awesome. And, like, people are like, what is Pardes? Like, that's whatever. And I was just like, it's funny. It's like, those people are so ignorant.
Okay, so Pardes is, you know, like, everyone always asks me what my name is, by the way, like, what is it from and whatever, but it's actually, it is a Hebrew name, and it is from biblical texts. It's from, so first of all, Pardes in a few languages means paradise. That's the surface level. And then also it also means, in Hebrew, it means an orchard, but there's a deeper meaning. It's a metaphysical paradise. So it's like a mental state of mind that is paradise. And the letters in Pardes stand for they stand for words. It's like an anagram.
Yeah,
is that the word?
I think so.
And so the letters in Pardes stand for words that are like, that represent the levels of understanding of the Torah. And it's a special level of understanding that once you reach that level of understanding, you've entered Pardes, which is that state of mind. It's like that mental paradise, which it's like a being in a trance or something.
Is it similar to, like, I think, like, what Buddhists would consider, like, enlightenment? Like, the same idea?
Yeah.
Like, the same general idea?
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, modern Jews don't really like this kind of stuff. They don't, modern mainstream Jews, that's why we don't talk about it so much.
Mm-hmm.
They don't like the idea of anything that's too hokey-pokey, whatever. But it is 100%, it's 100% biblical. So, you know, and people who really have studied Talmud would know, and they would recognize it right away. Pei, pshat, resh is remez, dalet is drash, Samach Sod, and it's a surface level understanding, the symbolism, the deeper meaning, and the mystical understanding. And there was a story in the Talmud of four scholars in history, in Jewish history, that have reached this place called Pardes. It's like this abstract place called Pardes, and one man died. The other became an infidel. That was Rav Elisha ben Avuya, and another one became crazy, and the fourth one was Rabbi Akiva, who became he was fine, but he never actually left Pardes. He always stayed in between the two worlds, and that's how he was able to stay sane. Otherwise, there was no it wouldn't have been possible for someone to enter Pardes but leave, but just go back to normal. And so and
it's so funny because like Christians a lot of times pick names based on like theology and like biblical characters or like concepts and character traits, and like I mean my name's Daniel, which was a book in the Bible, and he was a prophet, and
and a very important book too.
Yeah, like in my opinion, one of the most important in the Torah. It's in the Torah, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's in.
But it's funny because like the names that we have are like so uncomplex compared to that. Like that is so much theology wrapped up in like a single name. and when I heard that, I was like, my mind's blown. Like I don't know another name that has like that much like densely packed information into it. And then I was thinking like, that's kind of like how you are in a sense. Like you're just like this very complex like individual. And I think people see like different pieces of that on Twitter. And it's just so funny to me that like when people like lob these accusations that you're anti-Semitic at you, that they're literally like calling you that name. Pardes is an anti-Semitic person, and you're just like, you are so ignorant. Like you are like totally. It's really astounding.
They think I'm Muslim. That's why.
Yeah, which is like I guess even
it's
a little
another
more
crazy.
absurd.
Yeah. Also, by the way, Daniel's a Hebrew name.
We have Sprite if anyone wants Sprite. Yeah, Daniel is a Hebrew name.
Daniel is, my sister is Daniela, so kind of built on that. But you can also find Pardes in the book, the Song of Songs.
Oh yeah, that's
Solomon,
right.
yeah. So you'll see my name in there, and it's just nobody notices it. It's just you it's just like read in passing, but.
That's crazy. I remember you mentioning that last night. This person said, who is your favorite character in the Torah?
My favorite character in the Torah? Well, I would say, I was just talking last night about my favorite scholar was the Ramchal, or Rav Moshe Chaim from Luzzatto. He was an Italian rabbi. That was like my favorite scholar, I guess.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah. I mean, I only like know on like, traditional like Protestant Bible characters, but I think Moses is just like the most I know it's like that's probably like a lot of people's pick, but like just such a endlessly fascinating individual who was so powerful yet like deeply flawed at his core, and it's really just like really a fascinating story. The Bible, it's weird, like I feel like the Bible is like both. Like, I feel like people quote it too much and they don't actually read it. And, like, the Bible is so complex and so layered. And, we talked about this last night, too, that there's, like, a difference in how the Bible reads and what the Bible says. And, we see this even in the political space of people who, like, pick verses out.
Yeah.
That, like, it's like confirmation bias. They pick these verses out that they think that back them up, and it's like, well, for every verse that you have, I can show you another one that may not.
Yeah.
So it's just like, I think we need like more informed readings of religious texts.
Yeah.
And I think we need to like, this is just my personal opinion, but we need to like encourage leaders who are to not quote these texts unless they have a deep understanding of them, because that's really what like I think is necessary.
Yeah. Yeah, but also, like, even if they do, a lot of it is influenced by money, I think. You know, especially if there's a monopoly. If you have a religious leader who can totally... If you have a religious leader who can totally influence, like, an entire population of people and tell them what to do and they'll all do it, then that's a lot of power in one person's hand. And if they're not, like, totally a saint, they're very likely to say something that will benefit a certain industry or group. Like, for example, we were talking about like Jewish music or Christian music. Like, they'll be like, yeah, you can only listen to Christian music. You can only listen to Jewish music. But I remember when I was little listening to certain, you know, Jewish music, and it's like, well, first of all, it's way more expensive to go and buy just all these Jewish CDs instead of being able to listen to whatever you want. Very often they were American songs that were just like they just added like Jewish lyrics. Yeah.
Really?
So they would just take like a totally
That's so interesting.
American song and change the lyrics and be like, okay, it's a Jewish song, haha. And it would be so dumb. Like, it would make me annoyed, not because I'm like, oh no, what is this unholy music we have to listen to? But it would just make me think, this is totally an industry, like, that they're trying, this is totally a money thing. How is this what is this changing in my life, other than instead of having whatever music I want in my life, I'm specifically paying money to this industry that's not any better or any not
really
special.
Different. Yeah, that's so interesting. It's funny because in their own way, I think, like, a lot of religions do that. Probably, like, especially Christianity, like, the Christian music industry is massive. And it's really fascinating because a lot of people don't know this, but, like, there has been multiple times where Christian music has been so indistinguishable from pop music, like popular culture music, that they have actually charted and, like, they get airplay on secular stations. And I actually, like, don't have a problem with that because some of it is really well done and some of it's, like, really good, and it's just, like, a message of hope or, like, of love and unity and stuff like that. Lauren Daigle, I don't know if you've heard of her, but she's been getting, like, play on all kinds of stuff, and she's been invited to, like, awards ceremonies and stuff as a Christian artist. So I like it when, like, people like her are willing to, like, speak their faith into music. I appreciate that. On the other hand, there's, like, a lot of other people in the industry that are just, like, they can make a lot of money out of that. And I promise this will make sense in a second, but, like, I did some film work. I don't think I was, like, particularly a great actor, but what was interesting was...
Where were you acting, first of all? What was
I did, like, some indie TV shows, I'm not TV shows, movies, and, like, some... I mean, it's on IMDb, like, you can go look it up. But the point is that there's a whole separate industry, people don't know this, there's a whole separate industry for Christian film. And what's really fascinating about that industry is, I mean, I worked with some amazing people, like, I don't have regrets. There are a lot of people in the Christian film industry who don't really consider themselves practicing Christians.
Interesting.
And yet they know that because Christian films are typically lower budget and there's, to be frank, like, less expected of them. Yeah. And there's a market for it. And sometimes, depending on, like, the topic, not always, obviously the secular market's much larger, but, like, depending on the topic, it's a good way to actually make money. Yeah. And to get, like, some credits under your name, and then you can branch out into secular. And I remember, like, as a Christian, and as a conservative Christian, especially back then, going on these sets and then, like, hearing people talk about things and kind of, like, joking about things. Yeah. And I'm, for the record, I'm not, like, referencing any one movie that I was in. This is, like,
he was also in some pretty big TV shows, and he's not saying it.
And what's funny is, like, these the people, like the directors and stuff, weren't even pretending to be religious. Like, and they were kind of making light of it and stuff. It was just very much a business model.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I think, like, and there are lots of great Christian filmmakers. I feel like I need to say that. There genuinely are. I've met many. But like, there's also an industry component.
It is an industry. And if you're not like a perfect saint, you're going to be there like for the industry. You're going to be there to make money because there's so much money to be made. I mean, if you tell everybody that they have to eat from like a certain market, like, you know, with kashrut, you know, being kosher, that's a huge, in my opinion, that's a huge problem. There are so many ways to be kosher without playing into this industry that, and it's like, it's kind of dangerous to say something like that because it will make people so mad. But the truth is, like, the kosher industry also there's so much going on behind the scenes, so many special arrangements that they have with different businesses and food caterers and whatever, and there's so many things that they're doing behind the scenes that are totally business motivated. That don't have a religious component, and then they'll come out in the public and be like, yeah, you have to, you know, you can eat from this restaurant, you can't eat from this restaurant, you can't eat from this place. And to me it's very corrupt because you're basically manipulating people who will listen to you. They will do whatever you want them to do because of their faith, and you're doing it for money. Like,
yeah, and it's like, it's a tough thing because there's always good people with good intentions in those industries, and so it's like one of those things that it's really that way with most things, but like it's one of those things that I do struggle with, is like the commercialization, in my case, of Jesus, and you know, it's kind of it's like a very odd dichotomy, and I look at Christian art, and I say art, you know, encompassing like film and music and art itself, and I get frustrated a little bit because I feel like Christians have, like, inherently, as a Christian, you have endless hope and endless joy if you believe what Jesus says is true. And I feel like that should be reflected in our art. And I feel like we should be the best at music. And we should, like, that sounds like I'm being like a Christian supremacist, but like that would be what I would want. And I feel like that should reflect, and I feel like we should be the best at art, and I feel like we should be the best at film. And it's very frustrating, and I used to get endlessly frustrated with the industry because people were not really putting in the effort, because they have this concept in their head that there's a separation between what is sacred and what is secular. And holy stuff is over here, and everything else, all this unholy stuff, is over here. And it's like, in my opinion, if you read Jesus, nothing is secular. Everything is spiritual.
Yeah.
And if that's true, then we should be producing the best art, and we should be pouring ourselves into it. And we shouldn't be worrying about whether someone labels it Christian or secular. And that's just like my mini rant.
I 100% agree. Actually, I think when you were saying that, like, I think about that too. I think about that too in the religious community that I grew up in. Everything that was religious, everything that was considered religious, was always more expensive, but also lower quality. Like everything, you know, like the food, always more expensive, lower quality. Clothing, always more expensive, lower quality. The music, the quality of entertainment, or whatever else that you were doing. The education. I mean, I actually was, my high school had pretty good education, but normally the education was always poorer quality, and it was always more expensive. And it shouldn't be like that, because like yeah, it shouldn't be like that at all, because you're basically you're manipulating you're basically manipulating a bunch of people who are willing to pay a lot, and ultimately the kids of those people are going to realize what's happening. They're going to be like, you know what, I don't want to be part of this like low quality world that's more expensive, that is just taking advantage of everybody that's in it. I'd rather get better deals.
And I think that, you know, that like gets into like, you know, philosophy on like, you know, kids and religion, but like it is true that I think it's one thing I was thinking about yesterday is really interesting, that if you're raising a child in a particular religion, it is harder now than it has ever been in human history to do that. Because they have access to everything.
Okay.
And I mean, like, it used to be like you didn't have to worry about telling your kids not to listen to secular music because they never had access to like secular music or like literature or like whatever. And now everyone has access to everything. And I guess what I'm saying is like, I just wish that people would like take it seriously, you know, that people would take the responsibility to create, particularly art, because that's something I'm passionate about. But
well, if they can control you from being able to use the internet or watching television and all that stuff and try and keep you in a bubble as much as possible.
Right. And that like never works though, like long term, like that, you know, like that. Do you think that works?
It's working in the ultra-Orthodox community.
You think so? Yeah.
Yeah, just a whole population of people just growing up with no exposure to the world outside of it. Mm-hmm. I was actually lucky because I got a little bit, but even that, like, the whole idea right now in the ultra-Orthodox community, the community that I grew up with, the whole idea is to just, because of the internet and all this, because of the internet and our traveling, you know, like planes and all this stuff, and the exposure to more information, the whole idea is to try and control people as much as possible from being exposed to new stuff. And I see there's like some people in the comments that are annoyed, and I know that like a lot of Orthodox Jews will get mad when you say this kind of thing, but it's a real thing. It's a real thing that people don't want to admit. At the root of all of this is a real attempt to try and control people, which actually is working. I mean, it's working in Israel also, like, you know, like I was telling you about like where my siblings live, and they're, you know, when you have a lot of kids, when you control, but like in a lot of places it won't work, but when you're having like one community is having kids at a much higher rate than everybody else. They actually, my friend was telling me like a statistic, sorry I'm all over the place, but my friend was telling me a statistic about in the United States, in like the next 30 years it's expected that Amish people, Mormons, and ultra-Orthodox Jews will have like the highest rate of
that's really interesting.
Kids. Like they'll be like a big, huge portion of the population, because they're the ones having kids at a much faster rate than everybody else. And so everyone's always like, well, you know, these kids grow up and they get exposed to other parts of, they get exposed to like, you know, the outside world, and then they realize that their community isn't the only one, and they understand different, but when you're having a lot of kids at a faster rate, and they don't have to leave their community because their community is growing with them. So I think people don't think about that. And the communities are also so different. Like,
I could see that. What was it? I guess I'm trying to think of how to say this. was it a lot of culture shock, like, when you transitioned from that lifestyle, like, to living in DC?
Oh, yeah, it was, like, really big.
Massively. Because I just remember, like, I'm still, like, deeply a person of faith. And it's really a central part of my identity. But there was also, I remember, like, you know, just growing up in South Carolina, phenomenal parents, phenomenal family, just, like, genuinely great people. And transitioning from that sort of unexpectedly into the entertainment industry.
Yeah.
It was, like, major culture shock.
Yeah.
Like, I had no clue. And, like, I met some amazing people, you know, but I also, like, had to deal with, like, some pretty awful things. And it's just kind of interesting. I was just sitting here wondering, this is random, but I'm just, like, wondering if how different that transition would have been if I wasn't in, like, a conservative environment. You know? And, like, this one reason I'm so thankful that, like, my parents did like a pretty good job of, like, balancing. It has to be really hard, I would imagine, if you're a parent who genuinely believes something and genuinely believes, like, this is the way that you ought to live your life and this is what is best for you, but you, like, have to balance that with, like, understanding that your kids also need exposure to the world and they also have to make that choice for themselves.
Yeah.
And that's, like, something that my parents did, and, you know, I'm, like, I guess what I'm saying is I'm, like, endlessly grateful for it.
It is really helpful. I think that's why I think I was lucky too. My parents tried to take us around the world as much as possible to expose us to different, many different cultures around the world as possible. And, you know, we had a lot of lessons, different things growing up, music lessons and stuff like that. And, you know, people in my school didn't do that. It was, you know, I went to very religious schools, and it wasn't that kind of thing where, you know, everything was all about religion. So not everyone was, you know, very much into taking classes and learning some random art. But my parents were really into it. We also were exposed to a lot of different types of families. We had all kinds of friends that would come over, family friends. So I think that helped me a lot.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think that's, like, something else that it sounds like it was kind of similar, like, experience. And I don't know. I just, like, I think about it, and, like, I'm not planning on having kids, but, like, I'm like, that would be tough.
Yeah.
Like, if this is something you genuinely believe, like, that would be really tough. Like, trying to navigate those waters. Should we see what's happening in the chat, because we've been ignoring everyone? I don't know if this is, like, actually really interesting, because it pulls in stuff from YouTube and Periscope, which is really nice.
In college, Rosemary says, in college I had friends who didn't know that atheists existed.
Yeah, and it's funny, like, I think sometimes I, like, assume, like, if I'm talking with people that I've met, I do this. I will, like, say something, like, that is related to, like, Jesus or Christianity, and they just, like, give me this completely blank stare, and I'm like, wait, people actually don't know. And, like, it's funny, because I've been to all these third world countries, and, like, I still to this day, you know, I'll be, like, at a restaurant with friends, and they're just like, what are you talking about? Let's see. What Christian film companies? I don't need to name any of them. Like, IMDb exists, so you can go look it up.
Daniel Bostic. Look him up.
There are lots of Christian film companies. You can literally Google Christian film companies. Joe Anderson asks where you got your degree in theology from. From a small Bible college called Appalachian Bible College. There was like 300 people that went there. It was it's a very, very conservative school. Like, I theologically don't align with them on a lot of things, but I learned a lot.
I went to a seminary in Jerusalem after high school.
Oh, really?
That counts, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was just religion, studying studying like Torah basically, among different things.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was for a year, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. It's like
it kind of turned me off more from being religious, but it was fun.
Yeah, it's I think it's like theology is like one of those things that you find like endlessly fascinating, or you like don't generally. Like it's like, and I've gone through phases where I was less interested in it, but lately I just like can't read enough.
What's denomination?
Is what? It's independent. It's non-denominational.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm non-denominational. I have like some very untraditional theology, so I don't really like identify with any denomination, but I'm like endlessly fascinated and in love with like the person of Jesus, and it's like I just read and I read and I read, and like I see patterns, I see alignments. I feel like I'm like, it's interesting. I don't want to be like dramatic, but I feel like for the first time in my life, especially this past like 2 years, I'm beginning to not just understand, but to feel it. And it's like, it's really incredible. Yeah. I'm in like a really good place and I'm very happy is what I'm saying.
What's the thing that made, I mean, did you have a moment where it clicked? Like you felt like this is why?
I remember as a child even, I was, and this is like something we should totally do a scope on another time too, because it's like super complicated. But as a child, I remember like my being like really worried all the time that I was going to go to hell. And part of that is that there is a strain of Christianity in South Carolina and the South, not just South Carolina, that is very like fire and brimstone, and it's like, you know, you better turn around or you're going to hell. And you know, and then they would paint these like very graphic images of like how you're going to be burning alive and it's never going to stop. And I think as a child that like really rattled me, and I don't think, and I will say like I don't think that's good theology, and I think that is the wrong way to frame Jesus, even if you do believe in hell. But and then I just remember like having a conversation with my mom talking about that, and my mom is just like the most amazing person in the world, and her basically explaining to me that it wasn't anything I could do, that it was something Jesus had already done. And so like that was at the point, even as a child, where like I definitely understood Jesus, got the mission, and began that journey. And then like, you know, it like wavers throughout the years, you know, it's never a straight line. It's always a up and down. But just like once you start digging into theology, it really is like endlessly fascinating. And I was reading like conservative theology and very liberal theology, and
what's one thing that is just still eating at you and you just still need to figure out, like something that unsettles you within religion that you are still studying and trying to understand?
I'm still like, even all these years later, I'm still studying the concept of hell. And it is like, when you start looking at the original language and when you start like reviewing the doctrine behind it, it is not as clear as people think it is. And people don't understand that there are literally like 5 or 6 different words in the Bible that are translated into one word most of the time. Not always, but most of the time into one word, which is hell. And so I think like that is just like such a core issue, because it really isn't really about the actual place. It's more about like the journey that many people will go through. And you know, I think I'm like coming close to like believing what I'm like at the point where I'm like 85 to 90% sure. But you know, it's like a very fascinating concept, and it's wrapped up in history and Catholicism and Reformation, and you know, the people in the chat, I think like 3 people have said something about Martin Luther. And what's funny is that Martin Luther, as best I can understand, did not actually believe in like hell as we understand it. He was an annihilationist, so you can go look that up. Fun fact.
Interesting.
Let's
Yeah,
see. Gehenna. They were just talking about Gehenna. We were just talking about that last night. It's like the intersection of like, it's like one of the perfect like cases of the intersection of like Christianity and Judaism.
Yeah.
And we were talking about
it's a place.
Yeah, it's like actually a place. And I was in Israel last year, and we had a private tour guide, and I asked the tour guide to take me to Gehenna, and he just looks at me and he's like, why? And I was like, it's like a theological thing, and he was like, okay, it was really nice. It's just a field outside of Jerusalem that's wrapped up in like endless history and triumph and like devastation, and it's just a very fascinating place. But that's the word that Jesus used when he talked about what we call hell.
I still, you know, like, I really respect you for having this, for trying to, like, for staying in it and trying to understand the world more through, like, through your religion and trying to understand it more. For me, it was like, I just left and I was just like, I'm done with all this and bye.
Yeah. And that, like, to be fair, though, that I think most people who are religious have had that experience or have done that before.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that that's uncommon.
And then
it's
after,
just something you gotta figure out.
Yeah, like, after leaving, it's like, oh, wow, there's so many things that I did when I was religious that I still want to keep doing. Maybe, you know, like, or things that I want to do. For example, leaving the secular, like, I've noticed a lot of things in the secular community are not as valued. Like, family life isn't valued as much in the secular community, and that's something that I always wanted. But you can't talk about, like, family. I know, like, with guys that I've dated, it's like, you can't talk about family or marriage or anything of that stuff, because it's such a like untouchable topic. Or, like, you know, little things that I'll do that I used to do when I was religious, just because they were good lifestyle choices. You know, it just makes me healthier as a person. Like, you know, when I was religious, I said the Shema every night before bed, and it was like I meditated. It's like, you know, and not everyone who's religious actually does it. They don't. But you're supposed to. Just, like, you know, you just meditate a little bit when you go to bed. Right. Before you go to bed, like, just a couple minutes.
It's so funny to me how meditation, I'm, like, totally guilty of the fact that, like, I've tried starting it, like, multiple times, and I've never, like, put in any real effort. But, like, I guess prayer is meditation, and I do that a lot. But it's so interesting. Meditation is one of those things that, like, science has rediscovered it. Yeah. And they're all like, do you know, I see these articles and they're like, new study shows amazing benefits to meditation, and it promises all, and like, and these are real studies that show, like, the incredibly positive effects that it has on your body. Yeah. And it's like, well, we've got, like, you know, every major world religion has been saying this for, like, since the beginning of time. And scientists are like, we figured it out. You should meditate. It's good for you. And it's just, like, endlessly funny to me.
Yeah, it's like, wow, good for you.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Why couldn't you just do a study on all the religious people who've done it and their health levels?
Right. I want to, like, try, like, meditating a little bit better, because as someone who, like, struggles with anxiety, I think that would be, like, something that's really good for that. So I'm gonna, like, I will commit on this Periscope to start working on meditating.
Okay, if Daniel doesn't do it, then you can get him in trouble. And keep reminding him he needs to meditate. I think also, like, another thing about meditation, we were talking about this too. Western religions, like, and this is a huge difference between in Judaism, a huge difference between the Sephardic and Ashkenazi Jewish communities. Like the Ashkenazi Jews are more westernized, Sephardic Jews are more, Eastern, from Eastern countries. And so in the Western world, the idea of meditation is kind of seen as like a weird heebie-jeebie kind of thing.
Yeah.
People do it, but it's like, oh, that's kind of weird and hippie-ish, and just being spiritual is also seen as like, they're kind of weird about it. They're kind of weird about the more spiritual or mystical side of things.
Right. It's so fascinating because I remember even growing up, there was Christians that said that Christians should not do yoga.
Yes, that was with us too.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
okay.
Because
That's
yoga
another
is
thing.
like
our backgrounds have in common. I don't really know where yoga comes from.
Because yoga is like a Hindu practice or something.
Okay, yeah.
Was it Hindu or... I'm gonna sound really dumb, but
it's like a far eastern kind of thing, and
because
I remember
yoga is like some sort of worship, right? It was Buddhist. It's like yoga is some
Maybe.
sort of Buddhist worship.
Yeah, that would be actually a really interesting study, and it's funny because I think that, and we talked about this within the context of Christianity. Like, people don't understand that Christianity was not started as a Western religion. And that doesn't mean that Christianity doesn't apply to the West. It has drastic implications for the West. But when you start to understand the culture of that time and the culture of that area, and, this is like the area where your family is. And when you start to really research it, it really changes how you view the Bible.
Yeah.
And it changes everything. And I think that sometimes, and I fell into this trap in Christianity, viewing Christianity as a Western religion that is sort of like married to the flag, and like this like combination of like political Christianity, and I still struggle with knowing what the right balance is there.
Yeah.
But I think that that's like something when I talk to other Christians that I really try to encourage them with, is that like, you need to understand what was going on in the world at that time, and you need to understand that culture, because that's how you can understand the people that Jesus was talking to and the interactions that he had with people. So.
Yeah. It's the way that it's spoken about is so,
it's very
Jesus would have totally been against socialism, or totally been a capitalist.
Right.
Jesus would have totally voted Republican.
And it's like, well, every time in Jesus' life that he was approached with political decisions, it's almost amusing to watch his response, because he seems kind of bored by it. He's very like, he's not, but he's like he's very unconcerned with what's going on. Like, people are coming to him all throughout his ministry, and they're talking to him, and they're like, aren't you worried about this? And what about the Romans doing this? And should we worship on this mountain or that mountain? And like, he seems like very unconcerned by it. And in a way, that's kind of a little bit comforting, I think.
Yeah.
And
could you imagine if Jesus was like, this...
Yeah.
All governments should be like X. This is how economies should be distributed.
Right. It's like he has like such a bigger mission and a bigger plan in place, and that doesn't mean we don't care about those things. I mean, obviously, you and I've spent like my entire career in the political industry.
Yeah.
And you've spent a lot of time in the political industry. Those are important things that we need to care about. They're just not something that, in my opinion, we should manipulate religious figures into serving. So, but yeah.
Yeah. Any more questions you guys have before we sign off?
This was a
Daniel,
lot of fun.
This is a lot of fun. I keep wanting
and it only cost me $500.
$500 in order
We're
to
joking because someone earlier on Twitter said that I paid to be on this live stream, and
that's one of the tiers on my Patreon.
Yeah, if that's the case, I must have paid to be on a lot of people's live streams. That's so funny.
Yeah, but Daniel's going back, and so if you have any other questions for him, now's the time to ask, because then he'll be gone, and then
I'm sure we'll be back soon. Yeah, then I'll have to pay another $500.
What is okay, you're asking me. Felix says, what's the number one benefit of having faith? The number one benefit of having faith, in my opinion, is family. Yeah. Mm-hmm. For me, that's like literally the only reason why I stayed I stayed in the religious community for as long as I did, and the only reason why I would want to be affiliated with the religious community in the future.
Interreligious dating, that's really an interesting one. That really depends on the religion. So, like, there are certain, like, conservative Christians will not generally date someone who's not a Christian. And I'm sure it's the same.
Yeah, with the Jewish community.
I'm sure it's the same in Judaism. I can't speak for other religions. This must be a replay. They're not responding to comments. Would I have been able to read that comment if this was a replay?
I think I've seen that person before. You keep commenting on my YouTube saying I'm not responding to comments. And then I respond, and then you're like, well, I don't see you responding to my comments.
Maybe he should just give you $500.
Yeah, you should. If you give me $500 every month, then I will respond to your comments. Jeremiah says, family is not good reason enough. It should be faith or you are a hypocrite. It would be just religious practice for me. It would just be, just because I don't accept or buy a lot of the faith that I grew up with.
Yeah.
So it's like I will pretend to do it for the sake of my family, and I love my family very much.
Yeah.
And I'll pretend to do it in order to like have my own future family and all that stuff. But you can't really force someone to believe something that they don't believe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that faith means different things for different people, and it's helpful sometimes to just remember, for me, that faith is people are at different places in their journey. You and I are at very different places in our journey with faith. And that's totally fine. As long as you're aware of it.
Yeah, I definitely haven't. I haven't developed a lot of, I think I would be in a very different place if I had studied as much as Daniel did, or even a little bit, even a fraction of how much Daniel put time to understand his faith and the faith of others. So even if I had put a little bit of effort into doing that, I think I would be in a very different place with my faith. But for me, it was just burnout. Like, I was so glad to be out of it and not have to think about it anymore, that I just, and I'm still in that phase where I'm just like, I don't care. I don't care what happened. I don't care what the right path is. I just want to do what's good for me now, and I'm just gonna think about that later. But ultimately, I do want to care eventually, because I don't want to be living my whole life not knowing why I'm here or what the point is of all of this. Which, I don't.
And I think that's, someone asked, what benefit faith provides. And that does, in some ways, look different to different people. But I think the benefit for me of a comprehensive, mostly well thought through worldview with faith is that it is incredibly peaceful. And when things happen to you in life, and when things that are inexplicable happen, you understand the way the world works, and you understand the way the world's heading, and it just gives you this amazing peace. And I honestly like don't like know, like I haven't had like the easiest life necessarily, so like I don't, you know that I would have been able to do it without that, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Daniel's dealt with like a lot of crazy shit that I actually had no idea about.
Yeah.
Until very, very, very recently.
Oh, look at Alex sent a message. Okay, these are not frosted tips, Alex. My hair is highlighted. Although, actually, it might be a little bit because it's grown out, and then I actually had it cut, and yeah, they're definitely not frosted. Activate the call-in feature. We were just talking about that earlier.
Yeah, we want to do that, but I still don't know how to do it on this. Felix says because of the decline of religion in the West, new ones such as leftism have filled the void. Can you can divide a spirituality destitute population to overcome the faithful who claim to have had all the answers? So I think it does happen a lot where like we target religious communities and say like, well, that religion, that's religion. But there's also a lot of religions that call themselves, they call themselves being secular or being irreligious, but they are very religious by nature. Like they have a set of tenets and rules that everyone has to go by, and they have a fundamental belief system, and everybody has to follow it. And if you don't, then you are a non-believer. Like, how does everybody on the left believe the same exact thing? How is that possible? Like the right has all these different religious groups, but they all believe different things, and they call themselves religious. But how does,
I think it's sometimes helpful for me in the context of history to understand that history and human history is very much cyclical, and there are swings that happen in society. They're almost predictable.
Yeah.
We were talking about the other day about the contrast between the 60s and the sexual revolution and the change in culture in general, and then contrasting that with the hard swing towards very conservative political evangelical fundamentalism in the 70s.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes it's helpful to remember that, like, sometimes it feels like, oh, it's going to change and it's always going to be this way. And it's like, no, like, what's that new generation called? I always forget what. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like, there's millennials.
Oh, Gen Z?
Gen Z. Gen Z is woke.
Yeah.
Like, Gen
Zers are really smart. Every single one of them, they're really smart. They're really mature. And they're very aware of everything. They're just very aware of all these different belief systems, and they're very in tune with what's going on in the world.
Gen Z, is, and I feel like I say woke and it's like a dog whistle to the right. That's not what I mean. Like, Gen Z genuinely understands that the system exists, and they understand they have the ability to shatter it. And I don't know what that means, but it's like super interesting. It's gonna be a wild ride. It's really gonna be a wild ride anyway.
Yeah. I don't think I'll ever go back to being like really religious. I feel like I'm actually a lot happier. I feel like I'm more honest now, just because before I was always pretending to be religious just because I wanted to be, like I feel like I wasn't very honest before, and now I'm honest, and in some ways that makes me feel a little more at peace. But probably not the most. Like, there's a lot more learning for me to do.
Yeah. And I too have in the past come to sort of a fork in the road where I did not feel at peace with Christianity, but I realized that if I was not feeling at peace with Christianity, then something was seriously wrong about what I believed. And not that that's like what's going on with you. That's just my story.
I think.
And for me, it was somewhere in here, if this is the outcome, there's a verse, and I'm like, I should know where this is because I just read it. But there's a basically there's a verse that talks about how the concept of fear and should not exist in your life if love has been fully realized. And I realized that I had a lot of fear based on religion, and that tells me that I don't fully understand the love of God. And for me, it was really refreshing because I had to like strip everything away and strip away everything people said, and like there was truth in there. Like there was a lot of truth that I was raised in that was awesome, but like I had to just stop and strip everything away, and I just say, what do I believe is true about God? And then I just had to start reading and formulating my own opinions. And then if I wanted to draw on the things that I had been taught and had learned from others growing up, I would do that as I went along. But the end result of that is that I actually have a belief structure in place that is mine, and it is like really changed my life, honestly. And I'm not saying that's like should be everyone's journey, but I think sometimes it's like helpful to just like cut away all the noise about who says what, and this theologian says this, and this person disagrees because of this, and it's like, just stop and just like read what does, like in my case, what does Jesus say, and really who does he say that he is, which is funny because that's like the verse, the phrase that like I think split humanity. And when Jesus spoke to Peter and he's like, who do you say that I am? And he's like, this person says that you're this, and these people say that you're that, and these other people say this. And he's like, no, who do you say that I am? And like that is the central question of at least the Christian Bible.
Yeah.
And that's the question that I had to learn to answer for myself. And once you can, it's like totally freeing. It's really awesome. Yeah.
It's pretty cool. What you're saying, I actually, this guy I dated like a while ago, he said something about being religious.
Yeah.
He said that the way to be truly religious is to first become an atheist. I'm probably saying it wrong, but the only way to become like truly a person of faith is if you've like stripped away all of your beliefs in the first place, and you're just totally become like this atheist non-believer, and then from there build on start from the root, start from the basics with your beliefs, and then your religion your faith is true because it's all what you've built yourself.
It's so funny, like every religion in some way, shape, or form has central to it this concept of death and rebirth. And in Christianity, this concept of dying to things and being reborn into new things is very central. And it's something that Jesus addressed many times. And I remember that feeling of like, I'm like, when I was going through all that, I'm like, what, what's happening? Like what, I feel like my worldview is like, cracking. And I was like, I think I'm dying. Like, I think I'm dying to some stuff. And like, what's funny is you're dying to some things that are probably true, and like some things that you hold. But once you've once you've just given up all the noise and all like the people around you telling you what to believe and what not to believe, and once you just hold true to the one thing that you know, and then you just like let the spirit like rebirth you into something completely new, it's incredible. I'm like being super meta, and I'm sorry. I get really meta.
No, that actually is that plays on exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Orthodox Christian. You know, it's funny. I've known like multiple people I grew up with who have become Orthodox Christian, like from Baptists. It's really interesting. I haven't studied Orthodox Christianity that
Jeremiah is not happy with this. Being a good atheist will make you a good Christian. So
That's
that's not what I said. I didn't say being a good atheist will make you a good Christian. What I'm saying is the way to true faith, as quoting this person that I was quoting, the way to true faith is if you strip yourself of all previous notions of faith and you start from the core with what you believe and build and start at the root.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that the atheism itself is it's not that atheism is means being a good Christian. It means that you're basically resetting everything that you've ever believed, and you've totally struck down everything you believe. Like what Daniel said, you're dead,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're experiencing a rebirth because you are starting fresh with your faith. David Backup says, okay. Anyway.
All right, this was awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I want to try and keep Daniel on as much as I could, but Daniel's a human person that has to do, he has a life and he has to do things.
No, this is awesome. I'm so excited, and I'm like super stoked that your audience by and large was able to hang with us, because this is a little bit outside the bounds of like, you know, what's been they're probably used to.
What you're used to.
What they're used to like hearing, and that's cool. It's really great. Thank you guys for
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you guys for hanging in with us, and we'll be back soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, hopefully we'll do this again.
Another $500.
Yeah, exactly. And
someone's gonna clip that out and put that somewhere.
Don't just, if you make a GIF of any kind, just crop out my face. Just keep it Daniel.
I do not need to be a meme. That should be illegal. Yeah.
So see you guys tomorrow night. Don't forget to subscribe if you're on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button and like the video. If you're on Periscope, hit the heart button, and I'm gonna share the YouTube link right after this, so subscribe to YouTube. And see you all tomorrow.
That's it. Bye.
That's it.
And congrats on 1,000 subscribers.
Thank you.
Although you like obliterated that number. Like you went like straight to 1,100. I was just like, whoa, that's impressive.
Yeah,
so,
thanks.
Yeah, thanks y'all for subscribing. See ya.